Hello and welcome to another episode of ZenChats, a show where I talk to real people behind real projects. I'm Zeneca, and today I am chatting with the co-founders of the Enigma Economy project. So Joe and Stephen, they launched this project last year, and it's just different to most other projects. So they saw all of these sort of PFP projects dropping that had basically no utility, and thought that they could flip that on its head and come up with a project that was like utility focused, utility first. And that's what they did. They launched a collection and used a large majority of the money raised to go out and buy mining equipment, like to set up mining rigs to mine Ethereum or Ether, and various other cryptocurrencies as well to come soon. And the idea was for the NFT holders who bought into this project to share in a proportion of the mining rewards. So it really is a fascinating project, and we're going to get into all of the details in the chat. So let's jump right in. Hello, welcome to ZenChats. This is my YouTube channel, and I'm so excited to have you both here to talk Enigma Economy. But before we jump in, I mean, just welcome. Yeah, how are you? How are you?
I know. Thanks for having us. We're great. I'm Joseph. I'm known as Enigma Commander in Discord.
It's a cool name.
I'm Steven, one of the other co-founders, Enigma Dead Drop in Discord, and happy to be here, man. Thanks for having us.
No, thanks for being here. That's another cool name as well, Enigma Dead Drop.
Not as cool as Commander.
Well, I like Dead Drop. I like Dead Drop. What does that mean? What does Dead Drop mean? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so to go with the theme of Enigma, we were trying to come up with some cool, interesting names. And a dead drop is actually a location used often on either side of undercover work. So a little bit about me. My dad is actually a retired Fed, and he worked undercover for a bit. So I kind of knew some of the slang going into this. And a dead drop is basically a location where you can put something from it. It's discreet, it's safe, and someone else is picking up whatever you dropped off at that location. It's considered a dead drop.
So. I'm sorry, Joseph. That is way cooler than Commander.
Yeah, but let's be honest though. It's much easier to trust Commander than what he just.
Sure. Yeah. For you in trustworthiness, Steven wins coolness.
Yeah, no, you're right. 100.
Yeah. Cool. Let's actually, before we get into Enigma Economy, I'd love to know like a bit more about yourselves, sort of how you got into crypto and NFTs in the first place.
Yeah. So Joe and I have a interesting path of how we've gotten here, but here we are. We met on a rotation in our medical school curriculum, and kind of discussed things outside of the operating room. We were on a plastic surgery rotation for the month. I actually remember the first thing I told Joe was I was trading Zeneca. And he was like, dude, why are you in crypto right now? It's a horrible bear market.
You got to give him more context when you told
When was this?
This was like 2 years ago. Yeah. It was like I was kind of just starting to dabble away from, Bitcoin and Ethereum, wanted to check out other projects. And Zeneca I thought was pretty cool, based in Singapore. That was kind of neat. And I remember we laughed so hard about that. That was like, who is this guy? Like, and Joe showed like he had an understanding about crypto and the space, which is kind of odd to pick up when you're around a lot of medical students. Not a lot of them knew what crypto was. So Joe and I kind of bonded over that. We bonded over entrepreneurship, different ventures and things we wanted to do. And then we started trying to go about different ventures. And it was probably like our seventh kind of normal venture, I would call it, in the space of software as a service platforms. And it was failing. And in the midst of this failure, I came across hash masks. And we had a buddy who was a complete degen 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, was deep in the space. And I followed up with him. I was like, hey, what's this NFT thing? He's like, oh man, you got to get in this. The next big thing. I was like, what is it? I don't understand it. Like, it's just a bunch of art. And he's like, no, it's more than that. So it's probably about a year and a half ago, and we already had a pretty good team that we trust. And just because our current, I guess we'd say, project in the normal venture realm was failing, we thought we could pivot to kind of the Web3 space. So that's kind of our introduction to projects in the NFT space. And we grew and learned, and then realized that the space needed accountability. The space needed more people willing to raise their hands behind a project and say, I'll be doxxed, I'll support this, I'll put my face behind this. And that's kind of how Enigma grew and started. And it's been a wild journey since, and it's been awesome. The space itself is, in our community, I like to believe it's one of a kind. Everyone's super educated and reads the things we post and really tries to understand what we're doing versus just getting in, trying to make a quick buck and get out. So we're very fortunate that our project has kind of garnered the attention of such an awesome community. Yeah.
That's awesome. I got in sort of similarly. I had a friend of a friend that was in and like talking about hash masks, and I'm like, what actually, no. So I have a group, not a group chat, a chat log with my friend from a year ago. He asks me, do you know what a hash mark is? I'm like, hash marks? I've never heard of hash marks. And then, go on and on. A couple of weeks later, hash masks. And I'm like seeing these images of these pretty cool looking pieces of art, but like for tens of thousands of dollars, like multiple ETH. I'm like, this is some scam. This is ludicrous. Like, what are your friends getting you into? Like, just don't follow them. And eventually, obviously, I came around, but it sounds like we got into NFTs around the same time then, which I think a lot of people around, like, it's like close to a 1 year anniversary now. People getting in via Top Shot or Zed Run or Hash Masks or all those kind of projects. It was about this time last year.
Yeah, hash masks had a lot of cool variables. I mean, like you said, the art was cool, it was attractive. It was the first project that introduced to me, like, how different traits meant different things, and that that NCT name changing token or something where we were responsible for naming it, and it was my introduction to, like, very brief to what the space was going to grow to be what it is today, and it was pretty cool to see how far everything's come.
It's wild.
Yeah.
What about you, Joseph? When did you first get into crypto, and then was it also hash masks for you that got you into NFTs?
So somewhat similar. I think the first time I got into crypto was kind of by convenience. I didn't really understand much about crypto at the time. I think it was 2000 and I want to say 15 when I got in, and it was because I was a neuroscience major at USC in Southern California. I was really big into this whole nootropics, those medications that are expand your mental horizon and mental faculties, and after watching that the movie, I think Limitless, it was like this whole trend into nootropics.
I feel like I've listened to the Tim Ferriss podcast, and like every second episode he's going on about some sort of new one.
Some new one, yeah. I mean, a lot of them are insanely understudied, but at the time I went into this massive rabbit hole, and anyway, so there was this company in India called Sun Pharma, and I think if I recall correctly, it could be that or another one. I either could pay by like wiring cash, which I didn't know how to do at the time very easily, or I would go and buy this thing called Bitcoin and and like use that to buy a bunch of basically vitamins. I remember I bought like 16 Bitcoins at the time, which wasn't expensive. And I spent them all buying these vitamins. And that's when I kind of was like, oh, this is kind of really freaking awesome because it's so efficient. And that's my first introduction into crypto. I didn't think too much about it. But a few years later, 2 years later, I started a company. It was also at the time an ICO that I was pushing for called GeneX, which was really meant to bridge different electronic medical records in the health field. I was a medical student at the time, and the idea was, if you go to one hospital and they don't have your records, we needed a way that the different systems can interact, because today they can't really interact. So we wanted an encrypted, quick way to give people keys between those systems and allow people to access data. So I thought of this, whole layer to the Ethereum blockchain. I pitched it at some conference, and we were about to ICO it. And the SEC came out and said, guys, no ICOs allowed in the US anymore. If any exchange posts a coin that is not legally underwritten, you're going to get in trouble. So that was I think a week before we were about to ICO. So that kind of effectively put a wrench into that plan. And I'd say that's when I was really invested in crypto. Then med school kind of became really demanding. At the time, I was also running a traditional startup called Crimson. It was long story short, social platform. We raised a lot of seed funding at the time. We built out an iOS application, and then it got acquired by a Beijing, person very interested in golfing. He used basically the intellectual property and applied it to golfing when it really had really no link to golfing at the time at all. But I had a choice between continuing medical school or quitting medical school and pursuing that company. I chose medical school at the time, left the company. For about 2 years in medical school, I was kind of in and out of crypto, just a little bit of investments. Then I ran into Steven, and where his story kind of picks up. But to give some context to his story, so you can appreciate kind of the comedic value really of the whole situation. Was we were doing a transgender operation in a plastic surgery rotation, which is so far removed from really just thinking about anything else, because it's wild what you're doing. Okay.
Yeah.
And in our little break time that we had, it was 5 minutes. We walk outside and we're just staring at each other like, what the hell did we just do in there? We have never done anything like that. Obviously, it's all under supervision, but it's just cutting edge surgery. And we're looking at each other, and I remember he goes so what do you do on your off time? I'm like, not much. And I'm like, what do you do? And then he's like, well, I just invested in Zeneca. I'm like, what? So then basically Steven continued the rest of the story. That's kind of how it started.
That's a great origin story for for the two of you. All right, and then sorry, that's just really that's a funny image. Yes, you come from. I mean, your background's you've clearly medical school and performing surgery, and then to go from that to NFTs and crypto, that's a pretty big pivot, I would say. Have you completely stopped practicing as doctors or doing anything in the medical field, or is this you're doing both at the same time?
I finished medical school last year, and I haven't started residency, so I don't have any clinical obligation yet. So at some point I'll probably return to continue. Whereas Steven, I guess, had made a more drastic decision.
Yeah.
You want to talk about it?
I was in the middle of residency, middle of my first year of residency when I exited to enter the space full time. I saw myself coming alongside kind of the medical mission field from more of a management standpoint than a clinician standpoint. So what we're creating in the Web3 space to us has meaning and value, and we're here to stay. But we also see it in parallel sometime down the road coming back into kind of the vision of where I want to be. And that's in medical school. A friend and I started a pop-up clinic up in Cleveland for basically people who are underinsured and have no insurance. And that's kind of always been, I guess, where I want to end back up in that realm. But right now it's definitely been a lot of fun, and something that the stewardship we have over this is something we don't take lightly. We think it's pretty cool, and our investors have been nothing but supportive. So we definitely feel very obligated to not only see this thing through, but make it worth everybody's while. But to circle back, I do want to end up back in medicine, probably not as from a clinical standpoint. But it's not off the table. Who knows? Residency
Yeah.
can always return back to. If that's where things lead in the next couple of years. But as of right now, I'm pretty happy with my choice of exiting and kind of entering the space full time.
All right, back to NFTs. Enigma Economy. What was the genesis? Like, where did the idea come from for this project, and when did that idea come about?
So we did a project. I wouldn't say we did it alone. We were part of a project very early in, I think, almost the end of July last year, July to August. And it was just purely an art project at the time. And I entered it kind of from the angle that, one of my thesis that I studied in college was behavioral neuroscience. So, the whole idea of how you're going to hook people into a project. But really at the time, anything was selling. So it's not like I could take credit for the fact that we sold out a project, but I still pretended like it was all because of my amazing neurobehavioral mechanics that I implemented. And Stephen was also part of the effort at the time, and so it's after that project, Stephen and I were like, well, why don't we actually work on something that we're gonna do long term. It's gonna be more than just art. And it took us about a month or 2 months after that experience when we started to realize how many projects are just launching really visuals that are void of any true value. It's just hype and speculation. And at the time, I also invested personally in some NFT projects that started rugging, and that's when I learned the whole term, what rugging is and how great it feels. And so at the time, Steve and I were like, there's just so much potential in this space to create tangible value, something that is quantifiable, something that people can look at and say, hey, this is what my NFT confers. This is what it provides. And it's so different from everything else. And Stephen and I at the time also thought we can add some wild cards to this equation. And the wild card is so simple. Just show your face, take accountability, be upfront. Why is everyone hiding unless they have something to hide? And we're like, well, if we dox and that's a wild card and people are going to pay attention, then it's got to be simpler. So let's try it. And so we put together kind of all these new considerations. Let's dox, let's be honest, let's be upfront, and let's add a tangible value to it. One of our other team members is a miner. He's like, dude, everybody loves mining. Steven and I started thinking about what can we do with an NFT mining. And we're like, oh, well, there's this thing called staking that we just learned about. It's starting to become a thing now. So why can't we allow people to stake NFTs? And that process of staking will allow them to have some hash rate from the mining facility. And that represents directly how much they have staked. And it sounded great. We wrote a white paper. We launched at the time. Our Discord went from literally 5 to 10,000 people overnight. This was, I think, September last year. And that's kind of how it all came together.
And I think to add to that, it was also a kind of a new theme that people were almost scrambling to find a utility for their project. And then it was like, well, the consensus was we're in the crypto space. Let's just create our own token. And Joe and I were like, well, why do that? Let's just skip that and let's just give back Ethereum. And it even made sense kind of from a legal standpoint because we are in the U.S. and this was also the same time that all this, securities law and OpenSea was regulating projects who were creating their own tokens. And, so we dove into the legal side of things and getting counsel from a legal team, trying to understand what is the Howey's test. Do we fulfill the Howey test? And kind of came to the terms that, we wouldn't fulfill it. Simple debrief of what the Howey test is. It's basically if there's any expectation of profit from effort of the issuer. So if you buy something of mine and I have to work to bring you profit, the SEC would deem that as a security. The beautiful thing about mining and basically crowdfunding is taking primary sales revenue, buying computer components, and depending on the market, and for it to be contingent on market forces, it's nothing on our accord for us to be involved with. So there is a expectation of profit if the market's doing well, but it's not necessarily based on the effort of the issuer, which is us and our team. So we made sure to outline that in our white paper and our AMAs, and to tell our investors that. And we felt like we really kind of were the first to do it right. We skipped the middleman of creating our own token and went right back to something with value that we can give back to our holders that is more meaningful. And we were generous with it. It kind of goes back into the principles of what Joe and I wanted to do. And coming from the normal venture world, startups don't usually make that much money in the beginning.
Yeah.
And all these NFT projects were basically taking or maybe allocating 10% of their funds towards a utility. People were happy with that. And we're like, well, that's wild. So we took 70 to 75% of our funds, use the rest to pay off expenses and put it right back into the company. And that's kind of the reinvestment strategy we have going on right now. Or we basically took a vote in our community and we're following a 9-month reinvestment strategy right now to where everything we make from our mining pool, we're just putting right back into the operation. So I think kind of tying in those, I would call them just normal principles into this space, I think helped give people some relief, some trust into what we're trying to do and continue to do. And I think that definitely helped along with what Joe mentioned as well.
Yeah, definitely. I realized we're talking a lot, but and I do this in every interview. I haven't actually asked you what Enigma Economy is. So, and we might cut this out and like put it at the beginning of the video as well, so people get a quick like elevator pitch. What is Enigma Economy?
So I would say Enigma Economy is the very first legitimate decentralized NFT-based mining company. We have a company that's incorporated in Florida, which represents the operation. And the operation is NFT-based in that NFTs represent fractional ownership of the miners, crypto miners. A user, a person can buy the NFT, stake the NFT, and depending on 3 variables: how long the NFT is staked, how many of them are staked, and what the rarity of the staked enigmas are, they'll have a proportional ownership of the hash rate from the mining facility.
That's great. That's a good elevator pitch. Yeah. It sounds fascinating. It's real utility, basically. It's unlike almost any other project. Yeah.
And I think what makes it exciting is that the fractional ownership of hash rates are tradable. So by trading your NFT, you're basically selling your right to whatever hash rate you have. And someone else can now stake it and redeem those mined crypto. And what we mine is Ethereum right now, but we're looking to diversify into Bitcoin as a hedge because of the 2.0. And we're also looking into getting into altcoins like Kadena, which actually has a much higher ROI than Ethereum mining. Zcash, Litecoin, Ergo, stuff like that.
Walk me through, like, you had the NFT sale, you raised a bunch of money. Did you just, what equipment did you buy? How did you buy it? Where did you set up the mining rigs? All of that, the logistics. I'm fascinated, honestly.
So so it was basically almost like crowdfunding with NFTs, and it's basically a startup. And every, functionally it's a startup. We have all the operational parts of a startup, and so we bought basically GPUs. Right now we have 500 GPUs. All of them are installed and mining in Indiana in a warehouse where we're hosting. We just bought another 120 3090s, which are going to have a much greater, double the hash rate that we actually have right now. Right now we have BC160s. And the reason we chose GPUs is because we're aware that in some point in our lifetime, Vitalik will actually push proof of stake in Ethereum. And if we had ASICs, we would be completely screwed. So we we made decisions contingent on the fact that ETH 2.0 will happen some point.
Did you know how to set up these mining rigs, or do you outsource that to a third party?
I'm going to kind of paint this back into just this whole narrative of how cool life is, because the guy that is actually a wizard with mining and running the operation, we met a couple projects ago, and he was a member in our Discord, and he was a great mod, intellectual type. And Joe actually started having conversations with him outside of it and gauged his interest. And one day called me, and I was actually at a wedding, and I stepped away. And by the way, every time Joe calls me, I'm always in the middle of doing something, but he's almost takes precedence over my wife. Like, I don't know. If that's
yeah, they're reading vows, and I called him in the middle of his vows.
Wow.
I'm just kidding.
But he introduced me to his name's Nick, and man, it's been a cool journey since. And so to answer your question, we have a guy, Joe probably more than me had a greater understanding of mining and all the components we need to do it. But neither of us really, to this scale, have had a successful mining operation. Joe had a bit of a mined on a smaller scale. I never really actually was fully mining anything. But then Nick has been a part of some pretty big projects with different clients that he's helped set up farms. But we weren't, back then when we met him, we couldn't even foresee doing something like this. It kind of continued to progress, and here we are with that guy. And it just so happens his understanding of the space and what to do and how to set it up, it all kind of fell in our lap, and it was perfect. Same situation with where we're hosting. It was a nightmare. And I remember, probably our audience would even agree with us, we were kind of scrambling sometimes. We'd be in AMAs and we'd kind of have a plan with what we were trying to do. And suppliers fall through at times, especially when you're starting off. It's almost easier now because you have a product, you have now relationships and connections with suppliers. We're building that kind of connection with the guy that we're hosting this with at his facility, who he's scaling as well, and has some exciting things going on with the scaling operation. We're kind of almost partnering as we move forward. But to get to that point, it was a struggle. It really was, as probably any startup would tell. But to answer your question, no. So to the degree that we're doing it now, we would probably really be scrambling still, trying to find someone that you can trust to the degree you need to in order to say, hey, here's $1 million in mining. Can you get on OS and help us out and manage this? And Nick has done a great job so far. So it kind of goes back to having the right people on your team that you can trust, a good team dynamic, and all that stuff is kind of falling into place. It's been incredible.
To add to that, also, I think what was monumental was that we actually reached out to the community, our community in the early stages, and we implemented this concept we called the advisory panel, because we recognize the NFT space is just full of different talent. You could be talking to anybody. It's so versatile in what you can find. And so we threw out an advisory panel in our Discord. We had people apply. Everyone who would apply for a specific talent. They'd give us like their CV or their LinkedIn. And we started sifting through, looking for specifically what we needed and what we thought is going to be helpful, that we can consult on, just because we wanted as many layers of expertise as possible. We didn't want to rely on any single thing. We also went outside the community. We looked for some consultants who mined before, and we realized, there isn't so much to it. A lot of it is experience, and that experience comes from just doing it. So as long as someone has done it and we talk to that person, we realize that they're all sharing very similar things, and a lot of it is trial and error, because some variables you can't really predict, like when things, so like Steven's saying, really, we were supposed to go to Quebec. We were supposed to open our mining facility in Quebec, And that's because we had a big connection there who's running, $100 million Bitcoin mining operation. And he had secured at the time a contract for hydroelectric energy. So we would have been paying 2 cents on the dollar per kilowatt hour. So that was great, right? But we had a tiny operation and compared to his. So that didn't work out, fell through. They got delayed a lot, and we wanted to start way sooner. We were supposed to go to Texas next. Texas didn't work because at the very last minute, the warehouse was like, "Oh, you have 500 miners. I thought you had just 50 or whatever they said." And it was complete BS. They knew exactly how much we had, but they clearly wanted to commit to someone earlier, so that fell through. So a lot of that stuff really was learn as you go. We couldn't really predict, and finally we found a good place with a good deal. And even then, we're not really going to stay there because they're still higher than we want to pay in cost. And so we are planning to eventually ICO. And when we ICO, we get our own warehouse. We put everything in our own warehouse. We are going to open a completely different arm to the project where people can kind of buy miners from us directly, and we host them. And if they're Enigma members, we're not charging them any premiums on sourcing this hardware for them. And then the commission we take from hosting will actually be revenue distributed to all the token holders. So everyone who's staking Enigma is getting their proportional hash rate in crypto, and they're also getting tokens that underlie the basis of Enigma's buy and host service. So that's where we want to go.
That's super cool. Super cool. How much are you mining at the moment? Like, how much ETH are you bringing in per month?
So we have been mining for about 2 weeks only. We have spent about a third of the budget so far. Obviously, we accumulated a lot of ETH between 36 and 4,400. So ETH's current price is not very appealing. So we're trying to exit smartly, taking into consideration the potential downside and the effect the war in Ukraine would have on chip shortages and GPUs, because apparently Ukraine's like responsible for 70% of the neon that, the noble gas that is required for the step in chip manufacturing called lithography. So we're like, oh shit. So do we need to like start buying now, even though ETH is not at an optimal price? So that's something we're considering. But right now, we are mining at 34 gigahashes, give or take. And so it's about 13, 14 ETH a month. But with additional 120 3090s, we should be close to 50 some gigahashes. And hopefully once we exit and use the budget, we should be closer to 100. So we're looking at maybe close to 40 ETH a month. And with the scaling collection that's coming up, where 20% goes to the actual Genesis pool, which is what we have right now, plus the ICO, we're looking to actually meet our projections, which puts us in the first 6 months at about 150 gigahashes. So it's a pretty big farm. Our final goal is going to be about 4,000 GPUs or miners, but that might change depending on how early 2.0 comes, because if 2.0 comes too early, and we're going to have to diversify into altcoins and maybe get like ASICs for Kadena versus more miners.
This is so much of this is going over my head. Like I'm not a tech head. I don't understand too much about how mining works, but I mean, it really just, at least like to me, there's real utility in this project, and what people are buying with the NFTs, that they stake them and they get just basically fractional ownership in something that's producing real revenue, which is just light years ahead of 99% of other projects, basically.
Yeah. I think the cool part is, I don't know if you've tried mining yourself, but if you wanted to go buy one GPU, that's $2,600 just to buy that one 3090. We can get that 3090 for $2,200 because we're bulk ordering and we have relationships. So we get that competitive scale, right? The competitive advantage. And so we lower the barrier of entry for you. Instead of you having to pay $2,600 for a tiny little GPU that you're going to have to host yourself, pay energy costs for yourself, figure out how to set it up. It's actually kind of complicated to build a rig yourself. all the different components that you need to put together correctly. And then to maintain it, there's a learning curve to it. And so there's high entry financially, high entry barrier. And then there's also, a knowledge barrier as well. And then the difference between that, you owning your own mining rig, and Enigma, is that Enigma will keep scaling. So if your one NFT represents 10 or 20 mega hashes right now, in 2 months it's going to be 30. In 6 months it's going to be 60. So it's like you bought a GPU and that GPU became 6 in 2 years.
Yeah. Compound interest, basically.
Yeah, we keep scaling up the operation.
Yeah. What was the original mint price?
0.07
Mm-hmm.
was the mint price for the V1, V2. So the first 4,200. And then the V3, which were the next 3,800, they're all the same collection. It was a collection of 8,000. We just had phases of minting. That was 0.15.
Mm-hmm. Why the difference?
So we realized we really needed a lot more capital to actually get to the goals we're looking for. We also had to compensate a little bit for how much ETH dropped between V1, 2, and then the V3 collection. So that was mainly it. But honestly, it doesn't affect much because it's proportional. I tell this to people in the community who say, can the mint price be higher or can the mint price be lower? There's only so much competitive advantage you'll get. Like if we order 200 GPUs, we're not going to get it any cheaper than if we had ordered 100. So it's not going to make a big difference. So if you mint 2 Enigmas at 0.1 each versus 1 Enigma at 0.2, it's going to represent the same hash rate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's one of those projects that's kind of immune to the scenario where you don't sell out. We didn't sell out the first time. It didn't really matter because less holders, less dilution of hash rate.
Right. Yeah. How many holders do you have now of the 8,000?
I think I haven't checked just recently, but at least 2 months ago, I think we had around 1,300. I think now we're closer to maybe, I don't want to say something inaccurate, but if I had to guess, I think maybe 1,700 or 1,600. We have a lot of people, like Steven said earlier, who are very informed investors. Like they're coming in here, they know this is long term. They want to see it scale. They want to reinvest everything they're mining into doubling their hash rate, tripling their hash rate. So a lot of them are actually heavily invested. Like we have maybe over 150 people or 180 people with at least 10 or 15 Enigmas.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like the type of project that people will create spreadsheets and do all sorts of math and figure out, what's going to happen.
That's exactly what happened. If you get into the Discord and you look, we have projections and spreadsheets and pie charts and Venn diagrams all over the place.
That's awesome, though. That projects that have people who can do that means that like there's substance to the project. Yeah.
And again, I think it really goes to show that if you tie in just normal investor principles, it goes a long way in this space. And having a utility for a project that actually has substance goes a long way. And I think we did both those things, which gives us the degree of freedom to continue to scale, right? Even in the last 2 months in this kind of, these bearish waters, our floor price has gone up. And then also the cool thing about mining is, sure, the valuation of Ethereum drops, right? So, Ethereum's down 40%, 38% or whatever it is, but you're still making money. It's just worth less, right? So we're still mining and creating Ethereum.
It's the same amount that you're mining in Ethereum, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the valuation of what it would be in fiat changes. That's pretty cool. It's so at the end of the day, it's hopefully down the road, after this 9-month investment period is up, it's going to be a hedge to a degree, hopefully against inflation, and a hedge to also bearish markets. You know, everyone loves bull markets, but what do you do with your money when everything's bearish? And hopefully we can provide one of these solutions to that.
Is there any other sort of utility or roadmap items aside from the mining? Because I mean, the art is pretty cool. You get these cool like miner characters. Do people use these as PFPs? Is there any sort of story being built out in tandem to all this, or is it just basically the entire focus is on the actual mining rigs?
I think we're very rewards focused. We've said from the get-go that we're not necessarily, you know, a PFP project. But along with mining, Joe kind of mentioned that we're setting up to do an ICO that goes back into this reward mentality of, you know, providing our token holders something worth value. And then also our partnerships with different projects. We basically, when we consult on different projects or help build out from a tech side on different projects, we take funds that we've raised from that. So we'll take like an equity split, and from that, we'll pull that back into buying more GPUs. So at the end of the day, it is kind of in our name, the Enigma economy. We are trying to kind of really create a sustainable economy, which you can't really do without having the investor mentality. But yeah, sure, we definitely want, you know, our art to look good. I'm excited about our next V4 collection drop is going to be the end of our fantasy miners is what we call them, like our fantasy collection. And then it's going to be fun to pivot, right? To see what our community wants to see next regarding the art that represents, you know, this mining capacity.
So yeah. I'll give you a concrete example of how we try to create new streams of returns for Enigma holders. So, you know, to justify this term economy, but other utilities like I don't know if you've heard of Arity, but Arity actually is very similar to Enigma, but they took the mining to a much more literal degree where they're actually mining gold and emeralds. And, you know, it's actually a project run by a team in Colombia that owns an emerald farm, and they're part of a pretty large operation of precious metal mining. And so they just sold their pass. They're still minting right now, but they were minting earlier. They started maybe 3-4 days ago. And the idea was your NFT is staked, and you get X amount of gold per semester. And this is how much you get in 5 years. So stake NFT to mine gold, quite similar to Enigma. And so naturally, we felt that this is something that kind of fits our mentality, right? It's a value proposition with a tangible utility, and it makes sense. So we partnered with them, and Enigma holders get 5% boost in their gold mine. And then for part of their gold mine operation, we'll go back to actually pay gold to Enigma stakers, you know, assuming they follow through with the roadmap, and, you know, they're a separate team. So, you know, there's risks involved, do your DD, blah, blah. So, but still, that's one way, right? And we do other partnerships as part of our launch pad where, you know, projects can apply for us to implement mining for us to implement mining functionality into their project. So some projects have reached out and said, hey, we want our NFTs to also mine. So we're like, all right, well, you sell your NFTs, what you crowdfund will go towards scaling our operation. 10% of that will go into our Genesis miner collection pool, and then the rest you can mine, right? So that's like similar to the buy and host, but the buy and host is at an individual level. So that's mainly our utilities mining. We do have ideas to kind of create it more like a lab or an incubator where we launch other projects, and the profits we make from those projects go into recruiting more miners so that we're continually kind of expanding and giving people some value over time from outside sources.
Yeah, and I really like the partnerships angle. I think that's a really cool way to bring back value to your community, to your holders, to your project. You've mentioned how you're working towards an ICO a few times. What's the timeline for that, and what's like involved in having it? Like, that sounds really complicated to me, both from a legal standpoint and just the amount of work that would be involved. But maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, I'd
No,
love to hear more.
you're not wrong. You're 100% correct. And to even have the infrastructure in place is a little tricky, especially as a US based company. So that's actually what we're in the process of doing right now. Is like Joe mentioned earlier, our LLC is Florida based, but we're going to dissolve that in the next couple of weeks, and are actually working right now, currently at this given time, with the legal team in Cali, with the legal team in the British Virgin Islands to set up an offshore LLC. And that gives us the ability to do an ICO correctly. The way it works is you can offer your pre-sale to the US, but when you do your public sale, so you're no longer doing your seed round, you can't. You can't really advertise to the US. So there's some trickier components involved regarding, advertisement and how to go about things, but there's definitely a right way to do it. And once that infrastructure is in place, it's going to be a relatively easy thing to roll out then from there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a lot of nitty gritty stuff that you have to dive into and figure out to make sure, what you're setting up is not going to come back and, bite you in the butt. So
yeah. No, I mean, sounds like you're doing it right, which is always good to hear. What's I ask this of everyone, which is, it can be tough to answer, but what's your like 5 to 10 year vision? Where do you see this in 5 to 10 years?
I think, as Joe kind of mentioned, the goal would be to have I think he used the number 4,000, GPUs, but that's all kind of contingent on, what ETH 2.0 is going to do. When we start looking at different ASICs and miners, if we pivot more towards that route. So I don't know if necessarily using numbers is the best way to describe those goals, but I think to take the quantity aspect out of it, it would be more of a self-sustained economy to where we can continue to scale. And I don't think there's a reason to, as Joe kind of mentioned, to not stop scaling as long as you're not diluting what you're doing, right? So you have to do it in the right waves.
Right.
But once we have our ICO and we're able to, the biggest bottleneck right now is basically our infrastructure and hosting. So once we're able to really acquire our own facility, maybe in Canada for cheaper electrical costs, all those factors are going to create a catalyst to move forward and to have success. So 5-10 year plan would be very similar to what we're doing now. And that's looking at, 8 to 12 month projections of what we think the current market is doing, and making sure we're placing ourselves in the right position to handle whatever's going to happen, like we're doing with, ETH right now. If it transitions, are we going to be able to pivot and have kind of a hedge against what happens there? If it doesn't, we can continue to move forward. And I think that's going to be kind of the year in, year out plan to keep moving forward. Yeah. And with these different operating arms and different elements with our ICO and partnership projects, I don't think there's any reason why, our scaling efforts would be lessened. I really don't.
I think if you try and envision Enigma as, and I'm being a little reductive, but try and envision it as 3 parts. One part is the mining. The mining will consist of several coins, right? We're not just doing ETH. We're going to be doing Bitcoin. We're going to be doing other altcoins. One of them is Cadena. So think of the mining as one big aspect. Within that aspect, there's going to be an altcoin mining department that we're building out right now. So it's going to have and this is long-term thinking, experts who continually are doing market research, trying to understand where we sit on, the growth curve of different coins, because they're profitable at different points in their lifetime. And knowing, this is the coin that, in the next 6 weeks, this coin is going to make a lot. So let's pivot to mining this one. Right. And then let's pivot here. Let's pivot to this next coin. Let's do this coin. So we're going to have a very dynamic, versatile altcoin department. And then we're going to have the more stable, you're mining Bitcoin and ETH department. So that's going to be that one component to the Enigma economy. The second one is going to be the ICO, which is going to play a much bigger role as time goes on. And what it's going to be basically is buy and host service. People like you and I just want to own directly a 5 GPUs, right? I want to pay directly for those GPUs, and I want you to host them for me. If you want to do it right now, it's possible. There's a lot of companies, but they're predatory, right? They're going to charge premiums on sourcing or procurement of your hardware, and then they're going to charge anywhere from 20 to 60% of whatever you mine, or give you insane hosting fees. We're going to be much better than that and much kinder, especially to the people who are Enigma holders. And so we're going to do that buy and host service, and we're going to decentralize using a token. This token will be mineable by stakers of Enigma on top of their crypto, and it will be traded in the market. So that's how people can attain it. And each token will represent a revenue distribution. So if we're making $1 million a year in commission from all of the miners we're hosting, from people that ordered it, that 1 million will be distributed to all the token holders. And then the third part will be like the partnerships and what other things we do that are more community branded. Like, everybody loves the metaverse. We're not going to just say metaverse. We want to have a plan first, but for now, metaverse. Okay. And at some point there will be metaverse community. So that's, I think, the best way to think about Enigma. And, if you tell me 5-10 years, that's it's an important question. I feel like not a lot of people actually ask this, and this is the first time we get asked 5 to 10 years. Like, damn, dude, like, why don't you ask me what we're going to do after V4 mint? That's in a month. 5 to 10 years. I've been telling Steven this a lot, kind of mentioned it in the community a few times, but this is more like a dream. It can happen, but it's going to be hard to actually have kind of like, your little Apple store, but you're selling Enigma miners, like devices, hardware that people can buy. We host it for them. So we have kind of a front and an actual brand, a tangible brand. People can see, oh, I own an Enigma miner. You can click different buttons on that device to actually swap between different coins you want to mine, because all of it is actually done through an algorithm on our end. So that's kind of where we see this in 5 to 10 years. It's a long shot, but
no, that's really cool. Yeah, I love it. While you were talking, what dawned on me, which shouldn't have, as a surprise, I was like, they're building an economy. they're trying to, it's right there in the name, the Enigma Economy. But you've really thought about how to make this sustainable, economy, like with so many different income streams and avenues for revenue and rewards and stuff, which it's really, really exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we haven't really touched on the V4 drop too much. When exactly is that? I think you said next month. And what are the logistics around that?
Yeah, so the V4 is going to be the first week of April. The date's a little tentative. We don't want to give an exact date, but sometime the first week of April. The reason is we're trying to finalize some NFT LA booths. We want to get exposure and trying to grow the community. A lot of people in our community just want to buy V4, and like we have to stop them from just reinvesting in their own. Like they're already invested. Now they should kind of reap the benefits of scaling. That's the whole point of being a Genesis holder is, when people come and buy scaling collections, you're getting a fraction of what hash rate they fundraise. And it's free if you hold Genesis. So, but no, most of them are like, no, I want the free hash rate and bonus hash rate from before. So we had to cap it. And it's going to be a 7,000 NFT collection. We're going to give out about 1,000 whitelists outside the community. If you're a holder of any Enigma miner, you're automatically whitelisted, and that doesn't count towards the 1,000. So it's 1,000 for non-holders. So we invite new people. And the way it's going to work is it's going to be a hybrid mining pool. It's going to be separate from the Genesis pool, which includes V1, V2, and V3 miners, which is basically the first 8,000, our first collection on OpenSea. And it's going to be the same exact concept, just its own pool. And the pool is going to consist of Kadena miners. That's the plan right now. So it's going to have Kadena ASICs, which actually have a much higher ROI than ETH. So they're going to start off, I think, with much higher ROI immediately off the bat, and partially Ethereum. And that's the idea. We already have, the structure set up. People will be able to stake them, and they'll see a staking page. I don't know if you've gotten to the point where you staked and you saw the page, but the page tells you what, the rarity of your miner, and your aggregate hash rate. And soon it should also show you how much you're accumulating per second over time, etc.
That's very cool. And what's the mint price? I don't know if you said it.
Oh, I did not. So the mint price right now that we're thinking about is between 0.13 and 0.15. And it's going to probably be a tiered mint price, just because the way we look at the way this operation runs is it's an investment based project. It's not like, you buy and you flip. So the more you invest, the cheaper it'll probably be. So that's a very investor based mentality. You get this competitive advantage. So the cheapest will probably be 0.13 and the most expensive will be 0.15.
Okay. No, I think that's really interesting. Not a lot of projects have really experimented or explored that sort of mechanic, but I think it makes sense, especially for this type of project. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we've covered a lot. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you wanted to talk about before we start to wrap up?
First of all, I mean, I was telling Steve, I'm like, dude, we were actually getting to be interviewed by Zeneca, and I've been reaching out to this guy. Like, I don't know if you know, but I reached out to you on Instagram, on Twitter. I mean, I bombarded you in every possible avenue.
I completely when it comes to Instagram, I just don't see anything there basically. So I didn't see that, but I saw the Twitter ones. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, the first thing that I wanted to ask you is, I mean, when you look at NFT projects, and you have a very strong grasp of, the perspective of collectors in the space, and you look at Enigma, what do you see like about Enigma that you think kind of is attractive, and then what do you think is probably a challenge for your average NFT collector?
I think it's probably the same thing. So what's attractive is that there's real tangible value, there's utility, there's it's more than just a JPEG basically. There's a lot of meat to it. But at the same token, because of that, it takes some looking into, reading maybe all the documentation and understanding the value proposition, comparing, all right, what's mint price, what's floor price, what are they promising in their projections? Is this actually a valuable thing to buy? Do I believe, or all that kind of stuff. So it's the same thing. I think, like, for people who are willing to do the research and take the time to look into the project, which is hopefully more of this audience, the people that I think find my content are a little more conscientious and willing to do research and stuff, and less flip-minded and hype-minded, then yeah, it's great. There's a lot of meat and substance and value to the project, which sets it aside for most other projects. But I imagine that is also off-putting to some people who just, when they first come across it, they're like, oh, a lot of numbers, a lot of stuff. I don't want to deal with that. And like, yeah,
no, you're right.
It's sort of a it's commentary on the space right now, I guess, or what it's been like for the last year. It attracts all sorts of people, and you're building something real, and people have clearly found it and really resonate with it. And I think, it's not to me, it's not the type of project that's going to get one tweet from an influencer or something and blow up overnight or anything like that. It's sort of, people will one by one find it. People who are in there will tell their friends. They'll see what it is, see it for what it is, and be excited by it.
No, that's 100% how it kind of happened, actually. It's very accurate. Cool. And how do you see the evolution of the NFT space? I think Steve and I were super excited that, we're going to introduce all these new traditional principles of operation, conscientiousness being huge, right? Like, be honest, be genuine, dox yourself, not just your duck PFP on Twitter. So where do you see like the space going, and how you feel like projects will start to fit in and fit out?
Yeah, I think we are seeing more and more projects with founders are doxing themselves. Like, go back to like July, August, September last year, it was very rare. So the few projects that did it stood out a bit for those who were paying attention. Now there are more and more legitimate projects dropping, which is great. There's just so many projects. It's really crazy. And there's a ton of crap, but there's a ton of good projects too. And I think, like, almost sad part is that there's so many good projects that many of them are just not going to succeed either. It's just like they're competing with all the crappy projects that are competing for everyone's attention, and B, all the other decent projects launching and see all the existing projects that have launched. That it's tough, and it's getting tougher to launch a successful NFT project. But the market is growing. There's tons of people finding it every single day. I think we're still. I mean, the space is still really immature, and it's very Wild Westy, and it's very there's scams everywhere. People are falling victim to rug pulls and throwing their money at bad projects.
Right.
And I think as time goes on, the space will mature, and with that, the better projects will elevate, and the amount of money being lost to scams and rug pulls will slowly diminish, or at least as a percentage, it will diminish for sure. Yeah, but I think it's going to take a while still. I think it's going to take a while.
That's insightful.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think we're in terms of true mainstream adoption, which I think is inevitable, but I think we're still a while away from that as well. It's just so difficult for a newcomer still. Yeah. We need the tools to get better, the user interfaces and experience, and the understanding. It really needs to be abstracted away another level. Who knows what Coinbase marketplace is going to be like? That might be a big catalyst. A lot of people are pinning their hopes and dreams on it to kickstart the market again, and maybe it will, maybe it won't. Yeah, it's hard to say how it will happen, but if it's done in a way that just makes it easy for people to buy NFTs and safe, sure, it's custodial. Coinbase might hold your NFTs, but people are giving out seed phrases left, right, and center, and they're clicking on links they shouldn't, signing things they shouldn't. Yeah. So maybe for a retail investor, it's a good middle ground at least. Yeah.
I'm pretty excited to see it evolve into a different realms, and the visual component of the digital art is fun, and I think it's cool. There's a lot of good art out there, but I'm also really excited to see it venture into real estate or fractionalized assets of other illiquid assets that we can unlock now through this tokenization. So that's what I'm really looking forward to in the next couple of years. On where do we go next, right? What's kind of the next big thing that tokenization is going to tackle?
It's funny you say that. I'm actually just recently started advising for a project. They're launching next month, which is really, really soon. But basically, they're selling. There's this apartment building in Australia, Melbourne, Australia, being built. It's in 5 to 7 years, and they're selling apartments off the plan as NFTs. So illiquid asset, and they're saying, hey, you can pay with ETH, and then instead of it just being sunk for 5 years, you can trade these tokens, and then they're figuring out how to merge the two worlds together, and it's really fascinating. I think it's going to be difficult to get people to pay 30, 40, 50 ETH as the first one, but it's very exciting, and it's a very legitimate company or companies behind it. Largest building in the Southern Hemisphere, basically. So it's
wow,
very legit, and they're selling the apartments as NFTs or
I mean,
down payments.
Why would they make it so expensive when they can just fractionalize it more and make each NFT cheaper?
I mean, I guess because at the end of the day, I don't know how it works. When it comes to ownership of the entire apartment, having multiple people own that is probably legally more difficult rather than one person.
Direct ownership. I thought the way I was thinking about it was they fractionalize the real estate, and the real estate produces rent, and then they get a proportional amount of that rent. Because what I was thinking is, how are these people? What if these people aren't even in Australia? I mean, they just bought an NFT, and
it's basically it's an investment then, because I mean, there's a ton of overseas investors buying apartments in Australia already as investment properties, as a hedge against their native currency or whatever, and stuff like that. So this would just be another way for people to diversify into sort of a more real world asset rather than just digital assets.
I always love when the NFT reaches out and enters spaces that have people in
where it's not welcome.
That almost exactly. And that's what I think the cool thing about this project Arity did with gold is you have two different camps of anti-crypto pro gold or anti-gold pro crypto, and they're kind of basically trying to blend the two worlds, introducing those elements to both investors. Same with real estate. So many people die by real estate investors. It's the only way: invest in real estate, stay out of the stock market. And this will provide the same opportunity to kind of blend both worlds. So that's really neat. Yeah.
It's really exciting. I'm excited to see how it plays out, what the market reception is towards it. Yeah, I mean, I think I asked them, the team, what would they consider a success, and they said if we just sell one as like it just and show that it works,
Proof of
then we
concept.
can do it for other buildings, for other buildings, for other buildings.
Yeah.
Obviously, the dream is to sell like half the building, the whole building, but like literally just one. And yeah, I think that they have a really good chance of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's like to what you were saying before, it's like it's great with at the moment there's cool art and JPEGs and stuff, and we're moving into gaming, but real estate, medicine, even like all these industries are going to be. I don't know if you've seen the Genomes project, Geneticats. They're basically allowing people to sequence their genome and then have full custody over it via Web3 technology, basically, which is really cool. So it's like 23andMe, except instead of 23andMe owning your genome and then being able to sell it to Big Pharma, you own your genome and can decide whether or not you want to allow these big companies to query it for whatever research purposes. And you can generate income if they do. So,
Joe,
that's a segue into your pitch.
I mean, God, way too long, but I will say, I think as cool as I think the most creative and innovative ideas, especially in the field of medicine, healthcare, are going to face the most political resistance.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, 100%. This is something that's probably not even possible in the U.S. So if this is outside the U.S., it would make way more sense. Because here, I mean, HIPAA's huge; they will tear you down.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they are not a US-based company, so yeah. I mean, and rightfully so. When it comes to like any sort of medical data, you want to make sure that it's like extremely secure and protects consumers and people.
Yeah, but the funny thing is it's not ours, and that's what I think is cool about these projects that are trying to say, "Oh, this is kind of weird," but that Joe has tried to enter this space, 2017, 2000.
I think part of GeneX was that actually. I'll make this small little pitch. If you go on my Twitter, you'll actually see the very last thing that I had tweeted, I think over a year ago, was or the pin tweet, I don't remember, was that annually, I think it was in 2014 or 15, that statistic, $70 billion in healthcare fraud annually. Just in the United States. So healthcare fraud is this idea where the healthcare system will bill you for something that was either superfluous, so unnecessary, or it didn't even happen, right? Like, oh, give this guy an MRI, but really it was just an X-ray. An MRI is like $2,000, an X-ray is like $400. So 70 billion.
That's so crazy.
R&D, the research and development for only the top 10 big pharmas in the US. I could be wrong, but it's close to either 100 or 200 billion, just the top 10. That's how much is spent. All of those, all that money is coming from all the premiums they slap onto the medications that people in the United States are taking that are necessary for them to survive, right? And then that R&D goes back into spending on things that are required for research, like your personal data, your personal medical data. So basically what's happening is they charge you money to buy from you your medical information, and that profit goes back to them anyway, and then goes to the hospitals and the systems that are selling them and companies that are selling them your information. So you don't own your information. So at the time I was developing an app where you have to give the consent for a researcher or a company to use your personal medical data. And if you do consent, you also charge them for it and you get paid, not some random company that has your information. And that was a perfect model for tokenization. So that was actually part of GeneX, the ICO, but I couldn't do it. I didn't have money then. I have some money now. Maybe we'll move into it at some point, but it's definitely necessary.
Yeah, and honestly, it sounds exactly like similar to what Genomes DAO is doing, specifically with genomes, with your genome data. But
cool.
It is cool.
Yeah, the resisting forces, at least here in the States, are too strong to overcome right now, sadly. So I don't know how you would go about it, but it definitely doesn't stop someone trying to tackle it. You know?
Yeah, you got to
Yeah.
start somewhere. Yeah, proof of concept again. If it works, it works, and then yeah, David versus Goliath, I guess.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, this has been wonderful. Like again, like we veered off topic, but like, I could chat about off topic stuff all day long. But let's bring it back to Enigma Economy. Where can people find you? Where's the best way to find information about your project, about what you're up to? Is it a website? Is it Discord?
We have a Twitter, has a LinkedIn, a link tree.
Yeah.
But most of the updates are in Discord. Our Discord is fairly active. We have a lot of announcements in Discord. You can find our Discord from our Twitter.
Yeah, we'll put links below as well for everyone. Twitter and Discord. Yeah, I mean that's it for NFT projects, isn't it? So everything happens on Twitter or Discord, basically.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Great. So we'll post links to those in the description below. Any final words? Any parting words?
Happy to be here in the space. Super glad you let us come on and speak and talk about Enigma and what it means to us to kind of be a part of it from our end and seeing this thing through and seeing it grow from what it was to what it is now. And yeah, it's been huge to be able to come on and meet you and discuss it. Like Joe said, we've been itching to get on here for a while now, so to actually be on here is pretty cool, man. So definitely appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you both for being here and for being on. It's always good to talk to real founders, real builders who are building things of substance and value. And I can tell that you have done that and are planning to continue doing that. And you've got a great community, and yeah, it's awesome. I'm excited to see what the next 5 to 10 years brings, or at least the next 5 to 6 months. Let's start there. And yeah.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate this time.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. And there we have it. So I hope you enjoyed that chat, and I hope you enjoyed all the side tangents we went on talking about med and med tech and medicine and NFTs and obviously we went into a lot of detail on the Enigma Economy and their upcoming drop as well. So yeah, if you want to find out more information, then all the links are in the description below to Enigma Economy, Twitter, website, Discord, all that good stuff, OpenSea, as well as if you want to find any of my socials, the links are down there as usual. So and if you really, really, really want to do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, because I appreciate it. Thank you.